Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Barnes.
And I'm Mark Langley.
This podcast has a variety of horse management tips in it. How to introduce a new horse to your herd, how to stop your horse snatching at grass, and how to motivate our disinterested Stoic horses. Mark, your first question comes from Gail. She's from the UK and she's just joined the group. She says that she's really enjoying what you've learned so far and she's hoping to start your training methods with her 2 minis. Her question is, what's the kindest way to stop them from constantly snatching at the grass? She doesn't have a surface training area. She just has a fenced off area that's grassed and it needs to get mowed. But the grass is very tempting for them.
And with minis, it's harder because their nose is so close to the grass. When the grass grows a bit long, they don't have to reach far to get it. So
right.
It's a lot easier to stop a big warm blood from snatching at grass because there's a long way between its head and the ground. So you've got a bit more time to sort of correct it. So the kindest way, unfortunately, clarity is kindness. And softness is not necessarily kindness. Now, I'm not trying to say be hard on your horse, everybody. I'm just saying kindness is the most efficient way sometimes you can get a horse to let go of a strong thought and get into a peaceful, comfortable mindset. Okay, the more you're in the future thinking about the grass, thinking about the cold beer at the end of the hot day or whatever, the more you're sort of fidgeting in your seat, the more you stay anxious. Okay, so what I try and sort of, say is get used to the fact that something's not available, and then you can sort of start to live in the present that what is available. Okay, so
black and white.
So the one thing you don't do, you don't let them snatch and chastise or do something like that because I bite a grass for a little bump on the rope. I'll take the bump on the rope because the grass is too tasty. That's what ends up happening. So they know they can get a snatch and know the discomfort of whatever the person did, made them uncomfortable. It was worth it. I'll take it. I'll take a punch if I can drink the cold beer, whatever. Okay. So you got to think, okay, let the horse let go of that thought that that's not available. So go and teach your horse how to lead. Okay. When your horse knows the length of a rope, it's like I try and sort of teach people to understand that the horses are very sensitive and they know the length of a rope. If there's anyone ridden a horse that feels like it doesn't listen to the reins, but every time they loosen the reins, the horse stretches. It's like, how did they know? But then when they loosen the rein a little bit, though, the pressure on their finger doesn't feel any different. Like when you're riding a horse and you give the horse a little bit of slack in the rein, the slack in the rein on your finger that's holding the rein doesn't feel much different than when the rein is let right out. But the horse knows the length of the rein, so it knows it can stretch and it knows how far till the end of that rein. So when we're teaching our horses to lead, we're teaching them how long the rope is and how much rope there is all the time. So the horse knows where the end of the rope is. So what I try and do with horses, I might take them, and then you say you don't have anywhere without grass. So it's hard because you've got to teach this without grass, but where you have to teach it with grass. But I'm just trying to get to the concept in your mind so you're not constantly bumping your horse for trying to eat in grass. So bumping your horse for eating grass is saying, I don't want you to eat grass. But then the horse says, well, what do you want me to do? And it's like, because it doesn't know the length of the rein, it doesn't know that the grass is not available. Okay. So once a horse knows the length of the rein, it can lead up, it can do all that sort of stuff. Then when you let the rein out a certain amount, you know how much rein it takes for that horse to reach the grass or that rope in that lead rope. So basically you hold a length of lead rope with the slack in it, knowing that if the horse was to pull, it's going to hit the end of the rope before it touches the grass. Once they know how to lead, they won't ask for the grass because they know the end of the rope's there. So a lot of horses, if they lead well, they know when the grass is available and when it's not. So you've got to be a bit more conscious with holding that rope. But I think with your horses, you might have to make a habit when the halter's on and I'm working with you, no eating for a little while. So in that sense, you might just say the grass is unavailable while we're working. So the first way was, okay, teaching a horse to rate and understand the length of the rope and what is and isn't available, still essential with every single horse we teach. Okay, that's just something we teach our horses. And it goes hand in hand with riding. The second thing in your sense, because they really love that green grass, is maybe have a little rule to say, well, when I've got the holder on and I'm working out on this grass, we're not going to graze. You've got plenty of time in the paddock to graze and other times, so don't worry so much.
Okay, can I interrupt? What if they actually don't have plenty of time? It's winter over there in Europe, so they could well be stabled. So when they go out, they see the grass.
Okay, well, maybe take them out and have a time that they start to, give them some time before you work them to eat some grass.
Right.
Get it out of their system first, and then do a little bit. Don't just have it. It's very tempting for horses that are locked up on hay and sort of processed feed to see grass and not want to eat it. It's
Get
such
out the system, let them have it.
it's much better. So you can have like a maybe way that you can sort of just let them out, just unclip them, let them have a little bit of a graze. But as soon as you clip them up and pick them up and say, right, let's do something, then they know that that's not available. Okay. So very quickly, what I would start to do is a horse is okay with pressure. They just don't like feeling chased, and they don't like constant pain. Okay. So they don't like being jabbed in the ribs with spurs and had the bit pulled across their face all the time. But a bump to clear up a boundary's it's going to be more of a shock to the system than a pain. Okay. So it's just like, oh, what was that? So basically you set the rein up so that the end of the rope is above the grass and they just can't get to it. But you make them feel that there's space there. So they go, oh, they're not holding me and trapping me. I'm going to give it a go. And when they get down and they think towards that grass and they go to take that reach, you bump and they go, oh, boundary. And then you disappear again. And you just wait and you let them sort of go, what happened there? There was a boundary there. Almost like if they push through a fence and they got a little zap from a fence. And then you do that again and you just say, I'm clearing up a boundary. You don't want to be hauling them all the time, okay? So, and then they just reset a little and you just go quiet. You don't want to be bump, stop it, get back, rah, rah, rah. You just one, get in, get out and stand quietly. The biggest thing is being very present and quiet once they've tried it and they've come back to neutral again. When they test and they go, oh, I might try this again. Same thing again, clear up the boundary and then say that's not available. Okay, so you're basically saying that's not available because some horses, they're so exposed to people and everything. You can bang their leg, you can wave a flag and they're just going, oh, well, whatever. So you're just clearing up that boundary. What I don't like people doing when they start to use bumps is constantly chastising their horses by bumping on them all the time and bump, don't. So in this respect, we're just saying that's a boundary and don't push on it until they let go of the thought. Okay, there's a time there when the horse starts to think grass, you can say, I can see you thinking grass, and you pick up a little feel and then they let go of the thought. But you have to have set up enough sort of clear boundaries to know that they can let go of the thought. So you don't ask a horse to let go of a thought if you've never, if they've are used to hanging on to those things. So yeah, just clear up the boundary and say that's not available.
So again, we know that you're a little bit new to Mark's methods of it. A lot of it is about leading, as you will pick up along the way. So yes, good luck with that. Next question, Mark, is from Andrea. She's from Australia, and she says, how do you best introduce a new horse to your herd? She's got a herd with a gelding who is a little bit like a stallion. If she's sending a new horse into the paddock, he will defend his herd and go between his herd and the new horse, sometimes chasing the newcomer away. Even to the extent that he will try to get in between the new horse and her. And if she puts them in the paddock beside each other, the squealing will start over the fence and he will strike, which has already resulted in injury because he'll put his leg through the fence. Yes, we know about that one from our stallion.
Yeah. So I think if you talk to vets, you see a lot of these different styles of studs and stuff. And there's when you're flying, I notice when I'm flying into places, I look down, you see the horse studs and you see all these individual paddocks and these tracks up and down the fences where horses have been walking up and down. But they've got laneways in between to stop horses fighting over fences. No, I'm not saying put laneways in and put every horse individual. I'm just saying people think that a horse in a herd's more liable to get hurt than a horse on its own. But if you talk to vets, more horses get hurt over fences than they do, kicked in a herd. I'm not saying they don't get kicked in a herd and get hurt, but it's just that there's a lot of injuries over fences. So
interesting.
Separating them between fences if there's no laneway is not ideal, because you want a horse to sometimes interact over a fence and not fight. But then what happens? One puts their foot through the fence, gets really badly injured. You know, I heard of a horse once that, you know, they did it near a star picket, same sort of stuff, interaction, you know, tore himself open. And so I'll never, ever give the advice of saying just do graded exposure over a fence. And I did give that advice once, and I didn't sort of check into the whole details of what type of fence it was and if it had rubber and all this sort of stuff. And so it's too risky because there's too many injuries happen through the fence. Okay, so the safest and best way to introduce a horse to a herd is let them out in the herd and have a very big paddock for them to know to stay away from the herd as long as they need. That to me is a very effective way because there's room to escape. Now, if the herd, the gelding that sort of thinks he's in control of the herd and the other horses and stuff, if he thinks his boundary is 100 metres, well, that horse can be at 200 metres and he's not going to keep hunting it. Okay, so if you put horses out in the wild and there was no boundaries, they wouldn't hunt horses like we see them hunt in a 10-acre paddock. They would hunt until the horse is like over that bit of a hill, and then they go, God, he's gone, good. But that horse could slowly work on the outskirts of that herd for days until it finally got closer, maybe.
Yeah, because I remember going into a national park with you where there were several herds of wild horses called brumbies, and it was amazing how frequently the little herds lived next to each other. It was almost like on the corner of every bend in the river.
Yeah,
it was almost like new area. There was
a boundary there, and they kind of knew their territories a bit. And that's the same, but we don't have that big paddock. So unfortunately, we think, this 5-acre paddock's safe enough. Chuck them all in, see what happens. But some horses that are a bit more territorial, that 5 acres is still a little bit too close to their herd, and they'll keep hunting. So 10 acres might have been enough, and we don't know. And also the dynamics of each horse and the trouble that new horse brings in, they're very protective. But I found just what I've seen is over time, like we used to, like when I grew up with the horse tracking business, they'd just get turfed over the mountain country and they'd form their individual little herds. But when they all ran into the yards, they'd all sort of yard up and they weren't kicking each other. They had to be 25 horses in a yard and they'd all get used to it and they were fine. There was a bit of conflict, but they get over it very quickly. But they had time to be able to, and room to just be able to deal with it. And that's the biggest thing, is a bit more space. But that, obviously, if you can't do that, then I have to go to the answer of trying to figure out a way that you can introduce these horses together. So if you throw a new horse into a herd, everything's established and they're going to push that horse out to say, you're not ready for this herd, you're too troubled, you're too whatever. He could be like, these are my mares and I think I'm a stallion, and whatever the dynamics are causing that horse to push him away. So you've got to somehow, sometimes I would say, like, get the horse that's pushy, take him and take the horses out of the equation, the others if you can, or put them in a float, take them to a new dunghill. So you try and set up a situation where the thought of protecting a herd disappears from that dominant horse. Put them in a float together, take them somewhere. After horses travel in a float, like I've had so many horses come to clinics that were enemies that, they're squealing for each other at the clinic after they've floated to that clinic. So they'll bond because they've been taken away. There's conflict. There's like they're lost. They're the only thing they know is that other horse flesh beside them. So they bond a bit, and then you take them to a paddock somewhere and just let them hang out, let them have a scratch, let them have a bit of a deed. Because a floating journey for horses, it's a conflict. So it's like us. We go through conflict, and then the person we went through the conflict with, we go and sort of go, oh, that was. Not the one we were against, but I mean the one we were with. We may not have liked them, but after that conflict or after that football match, you're actually friends with them more than you were at the start. So with horses, it's much the same. They go through the conflict of being on a float together and going to a new place, and then they rest together, they scratch together, they might just become a little bit friendly with each other, and you're building a bond between those two horses and a bit of a neediness between them. And then what you can do, like some horses, even with that, they, as soon as they get a few mares around, they just boom, straight back on to get away, no matter how friendly they look. And it's a really hard situation. But what you could do is you could take, you know, you can alternate the horses, you know, and just slowly. So you brought these two back and they're kind of friends, and you might just put one horse with them and see what happens. Or you might keep the other one off for a little bit, put that other one with the other horses when he's not there, the one that's dominant, and let the other one bond with the other horses a little bit. But then you don't let the other one come back in and say, what have I missed out on? You have the other one separate, the new one separate, and then you put the old one back in that's been with them, and then swap it around for a little bit, and just have it so they're alternating with that herd, and the herd's bonding with the others a bit, and there's a bit of, and though you're changing the dynamics of the herd a bit, you're actually changing you are deliberately changing the dynamics. You're stressing the herd a little bit by those changes, and then that herd starts to sort of, you know, be a bit more adjustable, I suppose. And with that adjustability, you can start to, and then after a little journey together with those two horses that were in conflict that have suddenly become friends when they go away together, you put them back in the herd together and just in a big paddock and just see. And if that other one's not as angry and aggressive because he's actually knows the horse better now and he's not as, you know, persistent, he might still push him off, but he may be less persistent. When he's less persistent, then you can risk him being in the same paddock, knowing that he just has to go 20 metres from the herd and he's left alone. And he might stay at that 20 metres for weeks until eventually things start to happen and go, oh, well, you know, actually, I might come over and have a scratch with you today because, you know, I feel like it. And they'll slowly just melt into that herd. But so that's more of a graded exposure where you're changing the herd dynamics a little bit, but building a bond with those two horses. And I think that's a good way of also doing, but it requires more work. But as I say, a big enough paddock, they sort it out themselves. But if it's not big enough, they'll be hunted into corners and fences, and it's kind of risky.
And it really can take weeks, can't it? When we introduce new horses to our herd, I'm amazed that they will they'll go into two separate groups, and the main group will not let the new group in. And the new group will follow them on the periphery. Like you said, you can see them, you know, they'll be trailing in the back, not wanting to get too close. And they slowly inch their way in. But it can take absolutely weeks before they are integrated. And I sort of think that, you know, that's about right, because if any of them was carrying a disease, it would take weeks. You know, there's a sort of a time where they need to shed that virus before they let them in. And I sort of think, yeah, there's probably a very good reason behind all that. But yeah.
Yeah, and horses don't like trouble in their herd. You know, they don't want to unless they can really understand that's a benefit to that herd. Like I heard a story once of a horse of a lady who went through the Guy Fawkes, same country that we were talking about before, with the Brumbies on every corner. And on her particular trek through the Guy Fawkes, one of the Brumbies stallions had a sort of a 2IC that she saw. That the way she explained it to me was a young stallion stayed with the herd while the old dominant stallion watched them trekking, and he kept watching. And then at this one moment, he came in and he stole their gelding, took it back to the herd. And she said, why do you steal a gelding, not a mare? And I was a bit stumped at the time too. And I was actually, when we were in New Zealand, I asked Elsa Sinclair, because she spent a lot of time watching mustangs on, you know, different bends of rivers and different herd dynamics. And basically, I think the conclusion she came to was every stallion, every horse is different, and their personalities dictate the herd dynamics. And some herds were tight, some herds were spread out, just depending on the dynamics of the more dominant horse or stallion in that herd and the mares and things like that. So why that horse stole the gelding was, in her, what she said was, I think he liked him. I think he had something that was a benefit to their herd, and there was something that he watched him to say, we could be good friends. We got something in line. We got something in common. And it was like a human decision. But so, yeah, you'd think a stallion comes in to pinch the mares, but he took this gelding back to the herd and they had to go and catch him. So that's just, you know, all part of the things that you come across in horses, and there's no particular hierarchy order thing that we all got to go, this is how horses operate. They
can't predict it.
You can't always predict it. But with our strong gelding in our herd, who kind of, well, he's not necessarily always the strongest. He's just the one that overreacts like a stallion with the new horses. He was the one that was causing the most danger. But the little horse that got picked on a bit the most, as long as she could stay out of his way and get further enough away, within a week or so, she was back in with that herd and he'd softened and let him in. But it was hard to watch at the start, but we knew there was enough room, and they had their own little separate herd that this little one could go back to. But yeah, you would never put them in yards together because that's when you get a big problem.
Big kicking. Okay, last question for today is from Virginie from Western Australia. She'd like to know what your advice is on motivating a stoic horse. This is a young horse. He's very stoic, and she's finding that while he's quite smart, he's been slow at picking up his feel, as he will lean into the pressure of the halter for hours if she lets him. Now, he's not responding to the use of the flag in any way. She's tried lifting his head up to create imbalance. Some of your videos show that, and to get him to move, but that has had minimum results. So she's tried going left or right as a compromise. It kind of works, but doesn't appear to produce any long-term results or learning. So her question is, Mark, how do these horses think? And what does she need to do differently?
Yeah, there's a training element. There's certain elements in training, just like everything, elements make everything. There's two elements in training that are super important elements, and the balance of these elements is the key. Curiosity, caution. Okay, so a stoic kind of horse that starts to shut out pressure, shut out things around it. It doesn't have a lot of curiosity, and it doesn't have a lot of caution. Okay, if it was cautious, it would be alert. And unfortunately, you can't build curiosity. Well, some people with a stoic horse go down the curious road first, like maybe go clicker training, get him interested, give him a treat, all that sort of stuff, get him to sort of search a bit, and that kind of gets a bit of curiosity in him. But what's a dangerous horse is a stoic horse that becomes too curious, okay? Because when they're still quite stoic and they have curiosity without caution, that's a bigger problem, okay? So sometimes with the real stoic horses, I won't necessarily go down the road of creating interest through positive reinforcement training like that, because it creates curiosity without caution, it's a dangerous mix when a horse can block out pressure.
Mark, can you just paint a picture for everyone for what are you seeing when you describe a stoic horse?
Oh, it's almost like you can imagine. Okay, so I was having a discussion, I think, with Ross one day. It might have been even anyway, the question came up about something similar to this, and it was, and I would tend to really agree with it, was the pony breeds can be more stoic than some other breeds, like the Arabs, right? So you can imagine a little Highland pony with its butt to the Scottish elements, up with its shaggy coat, standing there in the wintertime, just, absorbing all that weather that comes on it, and just being able to sort of go into this little place. And, so that to me is being very resilient and being able to cope with immense amount of, or quite a lot of discomfort, but be okay with it. So with a stoic horse, you can create some discomfort, but it goes, I can lean against that. It doesn't really bother me.
So they come across as quite unemotional in the sense, they won't fidget, they won't jump up, they won't rear. They just stand there.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's hard to decipher because sometimes you get the internalized, anxious, shut down horse that once wasn't stoic, but it was taught to go into a state of helplessness. The stoic horses sometimes just go, it's just almost like people, they're the ones that people usually call stubborn. Oh, this horse is stubborn, and it feels like a stubbornness, but it's just a resilience to say, I don't need to. And they just block things out. Mm-hmm. And they are hard to motivate. And some of those horses that are really hard to motivate are the ones that don't need people. Some horses, like those bright-eyed puppy dog, the Labrador sort of thoroughbreds and stuff like that, they're all like, oh, please, can you help me? Oh, thanks. You made me feel better. I like you. But there's the other horses that just go, I don't need you, and I don't even need those horses over there, to be honest. I'll stare under a tree in this storm all day long and not even worry about it. Mm. And every now and again you come across a horse that doesn't need horses or people, and they're quite good on their own, and they can be even tougher again. Mm. But the one thing that horses always need, and this is where this can be sort of, when people go down the road of training I want to be the best for my horse. I want to be kind. I want to make it soft. they don't want to cause discomfort for their horses. But unfortunately, with the really stoic horses, you have to bring a tiger to the table. So basically, if so I said to someone, I say it a lot, is, if we had a row of shut down horses and someone said, oh, I think pressure shuts down horses, I'm going to say, well, I disagree. Pressure doesn't shut down horses. Lack of opportunity does. Pressure opens up horses. And they say, well, it's pressure that was put on the horse that made it shut down. I said, no, it was badly applied pressure. Now, just let me go and get my tiger out of the car, and I lead a big tiger out of the car, and I've got all these shut down horses in a line, and I gently just lead the tiger past all the horses, and one by one, each horse takes off. And I say, see, the pressure of that tiger just made every one of those horses open up. So it wasn't the pressure that shut the horse down, it was the application of pressure. So a lot of these horses that are stoic, some of them have been rugged, they've been rubbed, they've had their feet picked up, they've been poked, they've been patted. So all that stimulant around them is just white noise that they just blank out. So when you get big with a flag, it's just like, oh, what's that? Okay. So with those horses, to get them in the right frame of learning, I have to do something random that they didn't expect. And sometimes that random comes from complete silence. So when I get a really stoic kind of low motivated, like not very motivated horse, low energy, kind of just like, oh yeah, righto, then I go very, very quiet. Now, if everybody goes very, very quiet, you can hear everything, you can feel your breathing, you can kind of feel the ground underneath you, you can hear the birds in the distance, you can smell the smells. It's when we're constantly in our world of white noise that we don't notice all those little elements around us. So when we go super quiet around these horses, we just go still, because what those horses also do is they get used to our rhythms, our touches, the feel of our touches. They know they know how big we go, how small we go, and they know when we move away. They know us. They're still monitoring us, and they still and they know what they can get away with as well. So by going super quiet, you change the playing field into this silent place. And if everyone went quiet in a room, you can imagine your heart rate. You go, oh, hang on a minute, what's going on? Something just happened. If all the chatter in a room stopped. And that's what I do around those horses. I stop all the chatter. I just stop. And then just randomly, I might do one big thing, boom. Even if they get frightened of me when I do a shock, I might just do an electric shock myself, or bang my leg, or quickly hit a drum, or throw a bucket across the ground, and they'll go, geez, where'd that come from? And they'll go, ooh. And they go, hang on a minute. And then everything's silent again. Now that spooks the horse, and people go, I don't want to spook a horse. But remember the two elements that are essential in horse training, caution and curiosity. A horse learns through caution. It gets in trouble through curiosity, okay? So a horse will remember through caution. So if you have a horse that's not cautious when it walks into a float and it flips over inside the float, it's because we told it the float was too safe. If the horse knew the float was unsafe and walked on the float feeling a little unsafe and cautious, when the float moved, it would have been quite prepared for it, yeah? So we can't desensitize our horses to all these scary things. We have to have them walking with caution and building confidence in their decisions. So with a horse that's stoic, they need caution, and that bit of wariness that just says that I'm in danger gets them to come out and be responsible for their own caution and awareness. The next key to the stoic horses is, and it's the same with any horse, but for these ones in particular, like and with mules, it'd be much the same, is because mules are very, very stoic in a sense. Like, the old people who used to teach cattle to lead and horses to lead used to just tie them to a donkey to a night, actually. And then a little donkey by the morning would have this, horse leading around, because it could put up with the pressure all night where the horse gave in eventually. Okay, and that was an old technique, and it's still used to get horses to lead. But it just shows the resilience in those donkeys. So that's why mules have got that level of resilience and stoicness. So, and working with the mules, there was a mule once in South Australia that the lady said, I breed mules, but this one's the tougher one that I've bred. It's really stoic. And so with that one, we just did one little thing well, and we said thank you and went back to silence. One little thing well, went back to silence. And what that one little thing was wake up. wake up, be aware, and just move your thoughts across and step across one step. Thank you. That's all I want. But that horse had to do, that mule had to do that very well, not just, oh, yeah, I'm half asleep and I'm stepping across and I'll get rewarded for that. It had to be alert, aware, and step across. So the next thing with the Stoic horses is we wake them up, we get a level of awareness, and then we say, now soften and step forward, maybe. Just that could be a simple thing like that. And then they go, okay. And then you go, right now, I'm just going to turn off the noise and just go back to quiet. And then you might see them, oh, righto, everything's gone. I'm going to go drift away. And then if you see them drifting away right back down into their place, boom, wake up. Okay, what? Okay, can you take one step? Thanks. That's all I want. So the first transition before you do transition after transition after transition after transition is get out of bed and breathe and be aware and cautious. And until you can just pick up the feel of a rope softly and you see that horse grow into awareness and caution and be ready to respond. Now, because you ask something simple of it, it doesn't have to do a day's work. You're not putting, you're not making it ram fence posts all day. You're just asking one simple little thing. And then after a while, it'll stay awake. It's responsibility of staying awake. Now, by doing something random out of the blue, it's almost like we're in enemy territory. We don't know what's around the corner. So it's almost like you're telling the horse that the environment's slightly unsafe. I can't nurse you. So they go, oh, it's unsafe. There could be a tiger around the corner. I might have to be aware. And they remember that awareness is caution. So it brings them back to caution. I think it's familiar. If the horses get over familiar with their environment, over familiar with us, over familiar with everything, that there's nothing that can actually make them go, oh, that's a little bit dangerous. Okay. But here's the problem is a stoic horse can still get a big fright. Just like a shutdown horse gets a massive fright when they're thrown in the deep end, is we think, oh, they're all very quiet. Then eventually with all this pressure and pulling and whatever, we get them on a float. And then all of a sudden they wake up in the horse float and their caution hits them like an adrenaline rush and they blow up and panic. That's the problem. We can't have them super stoic and then throw them in the deep end. So that's why in whatever environment you are in, you have to bring up their caution and show them that they have to learn to be cautious and think through things and things like that. And that really helps them. But it's tougher with these horses because they don't have that natural, let's go and be cautious and think through things. So you've got to work on that. And then as you build that healthy caution in them and they're responsible for that caution, you slowly trickle in that curiosity and get them curious thinking about things. But caution will always cause a horse to become curious because it's through caution that they search for answers. So when a horse gets a little disturbed, a little cautious, they're seeking something else. They're seeking a good feeling or a refuge. So that's when they start to grow curiosity. So and then they become curious of what options there are when they're cautious, because every horse has or wants an option when they're cautious. So in the wild, it'll be, there's danger, let's go over to a safe place. Okay. When they get a bit nervous because, the water's running out there, they'll go find another place. Yeah. So it's that anxiety of the water running out that gets them curious to find somewhere else to go. Okay. So basically, that bit of extra caution will grow the curiosity, and then you'll have, them start to get the right balance, but it just takes a bit more.
Wow, your answers are always incredibly fascinating to listen to. Super. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Thank you for your questions, as always, that they come through. And thank you, Mark. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to Australia's very own Mark Langley, a horseman with many insights from his decades of dabbling. Jump online to keep learning. marklangley.com.au